Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we continue our exploration of crop circles. This is a topic that we've dealt with several times over the last several years, most recently with Hans Andeveg several weeks ago, in which he was talking about the potential relationship between crop circles and extraterrestrial intelligences. And that caught everyone's imagination as one plausible explanation of what is going on. And we said that we would try to deepen this dialogue. So here we are today with a sequel to what Hans talked about several weeks ago around what is really a mystery of how, wheat fields and various other configurations of land and crops can suddenly and without any apparent preparation form themselves into extraordinary geometric patterns. So today, we're going to draw on two people who have very extensive experience in crop circles. One, Peter Mary, who is from England, so he has been witnessing the crop circles for many, many decades and follows them regularly. He's the managing director of Ubiquity University. And then also Calen Rayne, who's the director of organizational design, who has been following the crop circle phenomenon probably for as long as Peter, and has actually created them through his own mysterious ways. So I want to just bring them in, Peter Mary and Calen Rayne, and they're going to show PowerPoint and offer their own sense of things. And then I'll circle back in after they finish for a dialogue for the balance of the time. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Calen.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And yeah, welcome everyone. So this is, I say, maybe something complementary to what Hans did the other week, that may offer a view into how, let's say, information coming from wherever might play a role in creating these phenomena, the crop circles. So Calen and I, well, I can't remember how long ago it was now, Calen, but 5 or 6 years, I think, ran a crop circle program for Ubiquity University in England, in the southwest. We went to Avebury and Stonehenge, and we visited a number of the crop circles that were appearing at that time of year, and had some of the local experts talk to us about them. And during that process, a number of kind of very interesting things happened. And the way we're going to do this session today is Calen has put together some slides that kind of reflect his experience of working with the crop circles. He's asked me to read out some quotes from the first few of them, so I'll do that and then tell a story about how we got to a particular location in Chartres during one of the Ubiquity summer courses, and then he'll take it from there and talk a little bit about his perspective on it and the experiences. And then he'll hand back to me and I'll share with you some thoughts that I have on how this phenomena might actually work. So what's the process whereby these crop formations come about, based on some research I did a few years ago. So Calen, anything you'd like to say before I start with your slides?
Yeah, once we get through the initial quotes, we're going to be talking about the Ghost Cathedral, and that it was 2011, so it was actually 13 years ago.
Wow.
We took the group to Avebury, Glastonbury, and Stonehenge, and then from there, I'll pick up what happened the following year in 2012, and then move forward from there up to and including Chartres last year, when actually 2 crop circles were generated off of the class we had last year.
Yep. Okay, great. So let me share my screen here. So to start with, a number of quotes that Calen has put together for us. I think our universe is pure geometry, basically a beautiful shape twisting around and dancing over space-time. And you'll see how relevant that quote is when I come to talk about some of the ideas about how these things are formed as well. That's from Anthony Garrison. From Irvin Laszlo, who many of you might be familiar with from his book Science and the Akashic Field. From ancient insight, the universe we observe and inhabit is a secondary product of the energy sea that was there before there was anything at all. Hindu and Chinese cosmologies have always maintained that the things and beings that exist in the world are a concretization or distillation of the basic energy of the cosmos, descending from its original source. The physical world is a reflection of energy vibrations from more subtle worlds that, in turn, are reflections of still more subtle energy fields. And from Carl Jung, rationalists insist to this day that parapsychological experiences do not really exist, for their worldview stands or falls by this question. If such phenomena occur at all, the rationalistic picture of the universe is invalid because incomplete. Then the possibility of another valued reality behind the phenomenal world becomes an inescapable problem, and we must face the fact that our world, with its time, space, and causality, relates to another order of things lying behind or beneath it, in which neither here and there, nor earlier and later, are of importance. So another dimension with different relationships to time and space. Another one from Jung. There are indications that at least part of the psyche is not subject to the laws of space and time. Scientific proof of this has been provided by the well-known J.B. Rhine experiments. These experiments prove that the psyche at times functions outside of the spatio-temporal law of causality. This indicates that our conceptions of time and space, and therefore of causality also, are incomplete. A complete picture of the world would require the addition of still another dimension. Only then could the totality of phenomena be given a unified explanation. And I think what we're seeing is one of the things that the crop circles do is make us explore that. What is this other dimension? What's the relationship between that and the circles? Because we have no explanation in our normal physics or materialist dimension of how they could come about. So back in 2011, I think it was, Calen assures me, actually just before we met, I embarked on a project to gather all the overlays that exist on the internet for Google Earth related to energy lines. And I'm happy to put the link in the chat later where you can download the file. And it was going to be my first trip to Chartres. And so before I went, I pulled up the map to see what lines might be passing through Chartres. And as you'll see on this map, there is one, there's a couple pretty close there. But I noticed off to the west, this point where multiple lines seem to cross. So one early morning, about 5 a.m., a few of us got up and rented a car and headed out to this place to make sure we were back, of course, in time for class that day to see what might be there. And this is what we found. We were coming at it kind of from the road at the top and stopped up in here and then came to explore it. But when you zoom in on the map, what you see is this. Now, this is pretty close to the shape of the cathedral. the core part of it. And a number of the different elements here, like the mound here, for example, is close to, I think that's where the labyrinth is. And there are other aspects that reflect where the altar is, for example. The inner space that they have, the square within the cathedral. And it turns out this was a place for horses to run around. And as somebody told us later, well, one of the things about keeping a place energized, one of the ways to do that is to have horses race around it, apparently. So we discovered this place at which Calen ran an altar to reconnect this particular place where the information is stored to be amplified through the Chartres Cathedral. So what you often see at a sacred site is that the site itself, with the stones or whatever, is the loudspeaker in a way for the information that is actually stored somewhere else that you would need a particular skill set to be able to discover. So we followed a bunch of synchronicities that took us here. Somebody else obviously knew about it as well, because at the head of this place there was this spiral stick that we happened to notice. So I think I'm going to hand over to you, Calen, now to continue the story, right?
Yeah, we'll continue from there. Part of my training from the nameless religion of the Himalayas is in Genesis point vibrational radiesthesia. So when I'm called in to work on a particular site, I'm looking for a genesis, what I call the genesis point, which is the place where this dimension or this plane of existence connects to what I call the primordial grid. The primordial grid would have been planet Earth prior to any buildings, factories, houses, people, or anything. It's just the pure primordial grid. And that initial grid had protocols. And the protocols are still running on that grid. So the training in the Himalayas, which is known as the patterns of heaven and earth, are the patterns of heaven and earth, the patterns that are generated on that grid, and sacred conventions, which is having the tools and the means and the knowledge to possibly manipulate those things as one deems necessary to generate a particular pattern. And sometimes I'm called in to do those patterns somewhere. So what we have here, I work a lot with triangles. There's Sierpinski triangles. So what I'm trying to do is move from this plane into the invisible realms. And to do that, you have to pierce the veil. And the veil is pierced by setting up Sierpinski triangles that are gradually dissolving until you can pierce the veil. So this says the trilogy of solfeggios is a series of 3 pieces for solo piano that explore the use of interpenetrating triangles. The triangles are created by stacking 3 notes in close intervals, such as major third, a minor third, or perfect fifth. The resulting harmonies are often dissonant and unstable, but they eventually resolve into a sense of harmony. So these are these triangles dissolving. And the Chartres Cathedral is located on such a powerful genesis point that one can use that to, I guess, play in the invisible realms. So the next one I've lined up this particular figure with the Chartres Cathedral. The Chartres Cathedral has spires that are 2 different heights, which creates a sort of a vibrato or something where that you can manipulate the tones in the cathedral. So the spires are 2 different heights. And it's a harmonically designed structure that can be used. The stained glass are located in a way that when the air moves over them, they emit sound. Sound is a very important part of this. We were fortunate the first year that I was able to use my singing bowl, my Himalayan singing bowl, for about 90 minutes in the cathedral to download a lot of the sound, which then enabled me to work with the circles. The next one is a slide that appeared when we were doing Musica one year. The crop circle appeared in France that appeared like a musical note. So it seems that sometimes when we're in Chartres, we can make things happen just because we're on a very powerful spot. We all have good intention. And on this particular year, I think there were 15 or 16 crop circles that appeared in France. and everybody was trying to figure out why all these crop circles were suddenly appearing in France. And it just happened that that was the year that we were doing Musica, and they seemed to be related to the theme that we had. Next, so 12 years ago, when we went to Glastonbury, Avebury, and Stonehenge, at that time I was working with 8 or 9 of our students from Wisdom University, including Peter, and I spent part of the time after locating the Genesis point at Silbury Hill near Avebury, designing a particular altar that I placed at Avebury, Glastonbury, and Stonehenge, and then introduced a particular sound algorithm with the intent that the Chartres Cathedral would appear as a crop circle when we were in Chartres the following week. So this is next series of slides here is just me working on this altar. These first ones are at Silbury Hill. And these are the purbas, ritual daggers lined up. And this was the altar. And the purba in the center, I called the Black Madonna purba because it looks sort of like a Black Madonna. And that was the one that had been carried into the center of the Chartres Cathedral. So that was my connection to both the Ghost Cathedral and the Chartres Cathedral. And the same altar I then placed at Glastonbury near the Tor, and on the opposite side of the road from Stonehenge, where the Genesis point for Stonehenge is located. So there was a series of this particular altar replicated 3 times across those 3 sites. And the end result was, when we arrived at Chartres on Sunday morning, the Chartres Cathedral appeared as a crop circle in Avebury. You can see where the spires are 2 different heights, and the beneath are 5 raindrops, which to me indicate the 5 wells that are beneath the Chartres Cathedral. This one didn't really have the Black Madonna as glorified as I thought she should be. So I continued to work on my pattern. When I came back, and 2 weeks later, a second crop circle appeared, which is sort of unusual, that appeared on top of the first one. And to me, this was the upper portion of my purba, my Black Madonna purba. And this one seemed to give a little more emphasis on the Black Madonna part of the cathedral. The only thing missing at this point was a point at the bottom, which would have indicated the bottom of the purba. And about a week after this one, the third phase appeared, where it dropped the little purba on the bottom. So this is very unusual that a crop circle has one appear and then a second one appear that connects it, and then also a third one. This is one of the only 3-phase circles I know of, but this is how that particular energy field at Chartres put information into the field that became a crop circle. Okay. This next one, the labyrinth that I put down, been putting down for the last 20 years, is called a spiral lonk pattern. And in 2014, on the winter solstice, I put one of these patterns in King, North Carolina, and we dedicated it on the spring equinox. And on the summer solstice outside of Glastonbury, my crop circle, or excuse me, my labyrinth pattern appeared as a crop circle. So that sort of validated. I thought that my pattern is more designed energetically than Chartres or the traditional classical labyrinth pattern for a fast-paced digital world. So my pattern is totally different. So once this appeared as a crop circle, I assumed that my pattern had been validated. Okay. Next, we left London one year, and I think it was 2017. I left with Janie and Annabelle, who are 2 of the longtime auditors of our classes that I've known for 15 years at this point. And we were driving from London to their home, their Hazelwood, and we stopped near Stonehenge and for the dog to take a break. And I went out and went across the field from Stonehenge near where the original Genesis point we found was, and put a particular altar down just to see what would happen. It was raining, and it was the wind was blowing fairly heavily, but I thought I would drop a pattern in the middle of the field just to see what happened. And the following year, this happened. And then the next one will show its relation to Stonehenge. So you can see where Stonehenge is here, and then this, we had pulled down that little spot where you can see a truck that's going by, a little opening there, and that was the opening that we had pulled into. And I jumped out of the car and ran over and dropped the altar there. And then last year, we spent a lot of time trying to connect. We had an indigenous woman named Moni who was there, and she was carrying 3 feathers a lot. And we were doing a lot of ceremonies that were drawing on indigenous wisdom from both the Celtic and the Chart tradition, but also from her tradition. And this is the mother tree, which we go to every year when we're in Chart. And I had an altar that I was working on, and we were trying. I had a purba with me, and I was trying to connect the cathedral back to the mother tree. I thought that was important because we were holding ceremonies at both places. And the night everybody left Chart, the following crop circle appeared, which sort of looks like the top of the mother tree, surrounded by the 6 petals, which are in the center of the Chart labyrinth, and then a series of 3 sets of 12 concentric rings that are going around that. And if you've been to Chart, you know that the rose window above the labyrinth has these 12 circles around it with various paintings in it. So this appeared to be possibly related to that. And then because Moni had these 3 feathers and carried them into the labyrinth and had walked around and called the 4 directions in the center of the labyrinth with 3 feathers, simultaneously that night the following circle appeared, which appears to be the 3 feathers. So next, I was called into I just got back from the UK for 3 weeks, and I was invited to a private property to check out a particular stone formation. I call it a gathering of stones, setting high on a moor. And this is what I arrived to find. And what's interesting about this particular array of stones is they're
Peter, I think we lost Calen.
I'm back.
He's back.
My theory is that they're connecting to the constellations. And this was the way indigenous people or the ancient peoples communicated with the stars, because we're star people. So my theory is that if you get Peter's Google Earth application, you'll notice all the mounds are there, all the burial sites are there, all the sacred sites are there, all the cathedrals are there, all the churches are there. You can see energy lines on it. My theory has always been that these circles are appearing everywhere, and if they appear at some place, and Peter will probably affirm this, a number of times, or a place of great importance, that at some point the indigenous people are going to put something on it, more of a permanent structure. And I believe that that's what this one is. So this next series of photos are just different angles of the stones on here. I think there's about 6 shots. So this one, I really like this one, the point. This one was just, at some point, my guess is this might have been a standing stone, and then it was laid down and set on a particular set of stones, so it had an angle to face a particular area of the sky. And it's the same thing with all. You can see how the rocks are sort of layered up, and angled. So they're reaching out sort of like when you see these arrays of telescopes that they put different places, trying to connect to different parts of the sky. This is another one. This is as I'm walking around it, just looking at all the angles of how they have these formed. And this one is particularly a nice one. It's another one. And one of the people I was with said, is there any chance that these just happen to appear by themselves? And they're stacked in such a way, there's probably well over 100 stones that are stacked in a particular way. And then there's an opening to go down into the center of them, almost like you're sitting in the center of a spaceship or something, like a Han Solo or somebody. And there's a hole up above. So you could actually go in there and sit and operate it using some sort of acoustic archaeology or something. I think there's a way that you could go in there and, like in a turret almost, and move the sounds around. Last year I worked on Broughton Hall, or Broughton Sanctuary, where we go, and that's where Science and Consciousness is in November. I was working on it last year, and they wanted to connect the Bronze Age ring cairn, a circle.
I think Calen is frozen again. Calen, calling Calen.
Maybe you should take it from here, Peter, and then Calen circle back.
I think what he'd say is he took this photo of the when he sets up an altar like this. Essentially, you need to see the altar as information, and then what he does is he activates the information using sound. The sound coming from his bowl, the singing bowl. And so, and when he did that and then took a photo, the photo showed up with this kind of beam of light on it.
Yes.
There we go.
The beam of light is aimed toward the Genesis point on the opposite side of the road. So that's an indication that, you know, there's something operating in an alternate dimension that's able to communicate by way of, you know, whatever means necessary. And I think there's just one more slide. Niels Bohr, everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. So I think a number of people have a number of different explanations for why crop circles appear. And my theory is that they're appearing all the time, and they appear in places where no one sees them. And it just happens to be that for some reason, Wiltshire in the UK gets a lot of crop circles. And I don't know if it's, they could come from ETs. I just think on my primordial grid from time.
Nope. Seems like his connection is a bit dodgy today. I'll say a little bit in my piece about some of the kind of connections to Southwest England. Anyway, do you have any more? That was it. Okay. Sorry about that connection there. Hopefully he'll be able to join us again soon. So I'm going to pick up the story from there and just share a few thoughts on, you know, how maybe the phenomena might.
There needs to be a.
Oh, you're back.
The crops are pulled down from below.
Calen, you're cutting in and out.
Yep.
For the last probably 5 or 10 minutes, so it's a little hard to track. Not sure what to do.
Okay, he was done, I think.
That was the last slide. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, good.
So I'll pick it up from there, and also to share a little bit around some thoughts on how it might happen. I'll whiz through a few of these quite quickly because this is part of a program, a course you can kind of pick up on Ubiquity. was a series I called Merry Musings, kind of basically giving me an excuse to dive into some topics that I was particularly interested in, and one of them was crop circles. I drew a lot on this book from Lucy Pringle with James Lyons, who I'll talk about in a bit. Just to acknowledge source, here's just building on Calen's piece, a lovely picture of the Chartres Cathedral there, and there are the circles that appeared, after we'd done that work around the cathedral and thing, and the final one. So just a couple of slides on some of the experiences that people have around the crop circles. I'm just going to come out so that I can hide the thing there and see you all and see the slide properly. So obviously a lot of people, when they go in, have healing experiences. They seem to mostly be temporary, but some of them do have longer term impacts. So there's I'm happy to share this in the Humanity Rising group on the Ubiquity community platform. So sound. Now, Calen mentioned sound earlier and the key role that plays. Many people report sound related to crop circles. Some people get ringing in the ears, which could be the electromagnetic frequencies. And other people actually recover from a partial hearing loss when they've been inside them as well. Light. People see these small, pulsing, tiny lights around them, often accompanied by electromagnetic sound, whether these are orbs or the same as orbs, which you might have heard of before, possibly. Obviously, there's something electromagnetic going on here, because people experience their hotel cards being wiped, phone batteries emptied, and you can actually go in and measure the electromagnetic field in the formations, which is quite different to the field outside of them. And a number of groups and individuals have reported intending for a certain crop circle to emerge and for it to appear later on. So this one was the door requested by Sue Jury on the 25th of June, and it appeared a month later. And I just posed an interesting question here, which is, did their intention bring it into form, or was it coming anyway and they picked up on it? But as mentioned in some of the quotes early on from Calen, cause and effect don't work quite the same way when we're working with information fields. So this kind of relates to a bit of what Calen was pointing to earlier, this question of the relationship between crop circles, ley lines, earth currents, water sources. And this is introducing some of the work from James Lyons as well. He's saying water sources are the source of energy, which rises in bubble rings from below. So the water rises from within the earth, creating crop patterns as the crop is flattened. So that was an interesting idea to me that I wanted to explore more, because we know that water holds information. All right, remember the Emoto and a lot of what the alternative medicines are based on is the water carrying information, and that information that we know also shows up as patterns, often related to sacred geometry, diatonic scale, like Emoto's crystals and things. And what you find over the UK is 13,000 of the medieval churches there were built on the crossover points of the telluric energy lines. So whether that's guidance, chance, or these people actually knew where they were putting the churches, which may, of course, have been built on older structures that were there, is up for you to choose the story. But it's a very interesting data point. So if we are going to do a little dive into James Lyons's theory, and James Lyons was a chartered engineer. His specialism was aeronautical research. So this was a bit of a hobby of his. And he explains it a lot through waves, and three different types of waves. Sound waves, which pulse, as you can see here, electromagnetic waves, which kind of flow up and down like this, and torsion waves, which are like a torus, which kind of flow like that. And it's the interaction between these that provide a story anyway of what might be the formation process of the circles. Just a couple of quotes from Lyons here. So this torsion wave form emerges from the earth where a crop circle is formed. The bubble rings rise to the surface and are created from electric strikes to underground water sources. So you have electromagnetism coming in from the sky, as it were, interacting with water, remember, which holds information. And like bubbles in the water, they rise to the surface. And on breaking through, just as soap bubbles pop, so do these wave rings of energy. The collapsing bubble, with its significantly lower pressure inside than outside, sucks down the crop in a very controlled manner. The results for such a simple form is clearly a circle. Thus, in essence, the crop circle is a frozen in time wave. So you could think of it as like a 2D cut slice of a 3D toroidal pattern that is carrying information, or a wave, a frozen in time wave. Size of the circle depends on the depth from which it's generated, so with the depth that the water base is at, and the angle of the cone, so the angle at which the electromagnetism come in, which dictates how the cone size grows in moving to the surface. The electrical phenomena involved are often directly visible in the form of spiraling columns of energy, like a vertical slinky toy, wave motion, see the pictures on the left. And in addition, small balls of light that I showed a photo of earlier are sometimes seen moving along the energy lines associated with the basic grid layout of the formation. So the triggering force is electrical in nature, strikes the earth to release these through these waves from underground water. So the information is in the pattern in the water. The pattern is held as information in the water. Pattern formation is a repeated version of this fundamental process. And then he says, interestingly, at stone circles, similar energy fields are far more stable, and columnar vortices are detectable at nodal points on the Earth grid system. So building on what Calen said earlier, we may be talking about the same thing, in terms of the crop circles and these sacred sites where somebody erected a more stable system for potentially holding that information. So, did stone water came first? The circles of the crop, the stone circles or the crop circles? Could it be that people saw these crop circles appearing, and that some appeared at the same places regularly, maybe where these telluric energy lines cross? And to honor that, which must have been obviously a remarkable experience, they built stone edifices to honor those places where these circles emerged. And then it could well be that when the church came in, they built their churches on those places as well, and replaced the original stone circles or wood circles that they often were as well at those locations. Hence the 13,000 medieval churches at the crossing points of telluric energy lines. Now, we know that consciousness can imprint water with information, as you will have seen from the Emoto work as well. And if you've ever done this experiment with kids where you have two plants, and one of them you put a sticker on that's about love, and the other is kind of negative energy, and you send lots of love to one plant and negative to the other, or to a seed, most of which of course is water, then the plant that you send lots of love to thrives and the other one wilts. So we know our consciousness and our intention imprints water with information. So if in the collective consciousness there is a certain pattern, for example, or a certain concept, or Calen runs a altar with certain intention and information in it, and that goes into the field, then that could be translated into the pattern in the water, right? But when it comes through the earth, lifts up in that bubble, then kind of imprints in the pattern in the field as that kind of 2D slice, as it were, of what's actually a 3D toroidal information field. So here's an example of a telluric energy line, this Michael line. So twin underground telluric currents, known as Michael and Mary lines, after the number of churches dedicated to either Mary or Michael, weave around this central underground midline. And it's what they call the caduceus pattern that you find within all the true ley lines, a triple fold axis of masculine, feminine, and spirit, which may be experienced by the practicing geomancer as containing information in the thinking, feeling, and spirit realms, respectively. So here you've got another connection between the lines, this idea of information, potentially the information imprinting the circles. So the process might be, imagine telluric currents weaving through the earth in generally straight lines. Crop circles form at the intersection of these telluric currents. Ancient people build their megalithic monuments to honor the repeated appearance of the circles. And then those monuments make visible these lines that we then call ley lines. So could this be the story? So somebody asked in the chat earlier about have people seen them? Yes, they have. And here's an eyewitness report. So there was a mist about 2 to 3 feet off the ground, and it was sort of spinning. So there's our toroidal form. And on the ground, the circular shape was appearing, which seemed to get bigger and bigger. And simultaneously, the mist got bigger and bigger and swirled faster. It took about 20 minutes to form, which, according to Lyon's expectations, remember the man is an engineer, based on the size and number of the circles related to the Earth's gravitational and magnetic field. So he has a calculation, if you look into his book, about how long one would expect a crop circle to take to form based on these fields. So the descending force emits an electrical discharge, releases bubbles from the underground aquifers, which rise up through the surface of the ground, forming the patterns. They develop like embroidery. So half above the ground and half under the ground. So imagine if you look at that toroidal picture on the left, where you can see the galaxy with the spiral arms, imagine that's the kind of surface of the Earth, as it were, but the pattern is going on above and under the surface. And it's like stitched. So it's like kind of like a waveform, like knitting, as it were, embroidering up and down through the surface of the Earth. So the fact that there's less pressure inside this bubble than outside creates the sucking motion that bends or sucks the crop at the base. Somebody also asked at the beginning of the chat about human-made circles. And of course, people have tried, but it's almost impossible to make them in the way that the crops bend without there being any damage to the actual crop itself. And what you see in the authentic circles is that the cellular structure of the crop has changed, but the crops are undamaged. And I mean, you know, to imagine some of these being made by people waving boards around is really even more kind of, you think harder to believe than even potentially ETs if you're an ET skeptic. So some of you may be familiar with the work I've done on volution, which is this understanding that rather than having a linear process of development, our life formation process can far be better be described in terms of a torus, where you have two poles essentially that then create a tension field that creates this toroidal process, and then you get this manifestation level at the 90 degrees. So you can see a clear parallel between, you know, Lyon's theory and the whole volution thesis. This is the quote again about the embroidery. So it's this tension field between the, you could say, heaven and earth, or the electrical impulse and the water in the earth that creates this manifestation in matter in the crops at the 90-degree plane. The collective consciousness can influence the information fields. As many of you heard me talk about before, the Princeton experiments demonstrated beyond statistical doubt that our intention and our consciousness influences the information and therefore the pattern that emerges in the formation process. So volution, for those of you who don't know, means spin. So when I was contemplating this volution theory and because I was looking at what do involution and evolution have in common, and the answer was kind of presented to me, well, volution, you just take off in and air and you've got volution. I didn't know what it meant at that point, looked it up, it means spin, which is of course what everything does, cells, the torus, the descriptions that I've read above about how the crop circles are formed is all described in this kind of spinning process. And often in manifestation processes, people talk about it being a combination of intention and attention. So intention from the mind, where we upload information, and attention from the heart that amplifies the information in the field. So could it be that the attention is like equivalent to the electrical impulse and the intention is like the sound? And here's just that reminder of people describing it in this spinning process, and it's swirling faster and faster in like this toroidal model. From the top of the hemisphere covering a crop circle, there's a nodal point, which if you go into the middle of a crop circle, you'll see this kind of tuft at the center, akin to a pole of a magnet. Needless to say, there is a complementary entry structure below. So again, you've got this polarity dynamic going on that you see in toroids and in the evolutionary process. It's not the force of gravity that holds the cosmos together. It is the electrical force generated by spinning electric charges. These, in turn, are best modeled mathematically as closed standing waves around a virtual toroid. This, in turn, forms a dipole field, not unlike a battery. So in quantum world, one would talk about everything being information, but what we see in the manifest world as being information carried on standing waves. So the waves are the energy waves that carry the information, and that as it clicks in to a certain density, they become standing waves, which define what makes up our material world. Meanwhile, more subtle information fields continue obviously to extend and flow in and out of the standing wave reality. So here we see the same idea, that it's the standing waves that form the crop circles. Two key words are implosion instead of gravity, which has everything to do with vortices, and cymatics. You may know, most of you probably know, if you have these grains or on top of a loudspeaker and you play music, then they kind of come into a certain pattern. So cymatics, the patterns that you see in sound and frequencies, for example. Energy of crop circles is spiraling electric charge, like a tornado. Again, this toroidal shape. And we know from the effects on pilots' instruments that there's a vertical field. So when you fly over crop circle, a vertical field of energy that extends to an unknown height above a crop circle, which is again an argument for evidence for showing that this is just a 2D image of what's a 3D phenomena. And people who've observed birds will notice that they actually often fly around the crop circle, so they're avoiding the kind of energy field in the 3D form. And this dynamic is what you'll see at the center of black holes. So at the center of a torus, you have a black hole dynamic. So I'm just going to skip this one. This is about time stuff. Yeah, I think we can move through that. I think that may be enough for now, because I then get into the evolution more. But yeah, so maybe just to finish on this one. The overall pattern here is synonymous with the generic structure of the galaxy. So you're seeing the same pattern. So why should the process of crop circle formation be any different to the process of the formation of any other life form, any galaxy, any cell? All of it is this evolutionary toroidal process. This is what generates life. And this one particularly, this is one of the biggest ones, the Julia set witnessed by many people, forming over a period of 25 minutes. So if you want to go into more detail, feel free to look up the Merry Musings on the Ubiquity platform. The Volution, which was my PhD dissertation, is also now out in a book form. Should have put a picture up, shouldn't I? But that was one of the first ones we produced with Ubiquity Publishing. So you can deep dive there. I suggest we hold the talk now and let's just open up and see if there are other questions or anything anybody else wants to throw in and we want to go into more deeply. So I haven't been able to follow the chat because I've been screen sharing, but let me dive in a little bit there. Calen, do you want to say anything while I dig up the? I'll dig up the link to the. I'll dig up the link to the grid lines for everybody.
Yeah, with regard to cymatics, which is the Hans Jenny's work, it's another thing that sometimes happens on the primordial grid. Things just start shaking until they appear in place, and that would explain how that's translated to this dimension. And a lot of what you said confirms my belief that what happens is coming from below. That is, this is not somebody in a spaceship somewhere that's shooting the pattern down from above. It's the idea that the Earth itself is calling for this pattern and it's bringing it down from below.
Yeah. Now, I mean, to bridge to the ETs, of course, it could potentially be that they are programming the water with information. So where the information comes from, whether it's one of Calen's altars, whether it's somebody praying for a certain crop circle to emerge or a group doing a ritual, whatever, the process is the same. What you're doing is you're imprinting information into the field that then is held in the water. And when the water is sucked down, that's what kind of creates the pattern. So I just put a link to the Google Earth file, which you can download and import into Google Earth. So this isn't like Google browser, but you have to actually get the Google Earth app, and then you can kind of choose what you want to view in terms of like sacred sites or earth energy lines and things. Let's see. So we'll start from the top a little bit to be fair. Who's in? Go ahead, Calen.
I was just going to say it's highly likely someone said something about New Jersey, that a crop circle of some sort has appeared in New Jersey. They don't necessarily have to be the size of a football field. I mean, some of the altars I put down are put down on a small replica of a Chart labyrinth that's maybe a foot across. So I don't know that these patterns are not appearing all over the world, very small where you wouldn't even notice them, or you might, people would just walk by them and just not recognize that it's an actual pattern. It's similar to some of the stone gatherings of stones. They just appear to be a random stone somewhere, but then when you look more closely, you can see how the stone is angled a particular way at a particular part of the sky. It's got a particularly high vibration, which means it is a significant stone that may be in a field of 100 other stones, but through the vibrational radiesthesia, you can identify which is the stone that's carrying the information and have a conversation with it, same as trees. So if you're walking through the forest or through a gathering of stones, don't be surprised if you're actually walking into something that previously was a crop circle.
Yeah. Nelika asks, what about the quality of the physical substance of the crop? It's an undamaged. So in the authentic, crop circles, the crop is undamaged. The farmers, depends on the farmer. Like some of them, have they put a donations box out, they leave it in there, people come in and they kind of put a donation in the box. Others just don't want anything to do with it and mow it out as soon as they can. So there's a bunch of people who fly over the areas where the crop circles appear and try to spot them, take photos, and put them on I think it's the Crop Circle Connector is what it is, the most popular one, website, where you can get alerts for the most recent ones and things that come up. Is there any connection, Roberto asks, from an energy point to the pyramids? You want to take that, Calen?
In all likelihood, a particular pattern appeared at some point in the desert, or I worked on Tikal in Guatemala. I was called down to do some work on that one, and I climbed to the top of the pyramid with the shaman, and what she wanted to do was play, the best I can describe them are pipes in the rainforest, because it was built in the rainforest. And my assumption was at some point, it might have been a crop circle, but I think other things appear other than crop circles that indicate that there's a energetic quality to the land that requires some larger structure. And when we got to the top of the pyramid, using a particular algorithm with a singing bowl, we were able to have these pipes rise out of the mist above the rainforest. And I turned them over, and she played them, just played them with her hands, the sounds, and then said, she was done, and we dropped them back. So it's not necessarily a crop circle. Again, it could just be a small stone that has the vibration and the quality that brings people there, and they worship it, for lack of a better word. And at some point they want to build something larger than that, and they build a little small structure that they can sit by the stone, and the next thing you know, it's a larger structure, and the next thing you know, that you have a Gothic cathedral sitting on top of it.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Any other questions or comments? So somebody asks, Jonathan Paul, is the ritual activity a contemporary form of cosmic theurgy, like in Neoplatonism? Not quite sure which ritual activity you're referring to, Jonathan. Do you have any take on that, Calen? Feel free to kind of explain a bit more in the chat if you like. I don't think we quite grok that one. Well, and Kim and somebody else who's in charge. Well, as you've seen, I think from the stories, Kim, it's there's nobody so much as in charge. It's who is generating and who is putting information into the information fields intentionally. So where are these patterns coming from? Where, if they're information, then where's that information coming from? Whether it's particularly strong, energetically charged event going on somewhere, or the collective attention is focused on something, or somebody like just wishing that a door would appear, like that woman did, and it appearing a month later, so, and again, we come back to this question of linearity and non-linearity. So in our material world, we think of things as cause effect, in a linear way, but in the information domains, it doesn't act like that. So that's why you have, right, the particles in quantum physics, you change one and then the other one changes at exactly the same time. So there isn't a linearity to it. So there is a kind of co-emergence to it somewhere as well, or maybe even linear time aspects that we can't quite wrap our heads around at the moment. Calen, it says, can you say more about the model temple you dropped and had effects? So more about
the altar,
the altars, yeah.
The altar, it's basically mathematical. I have over 700 ritual objects in I call it the chamber. And anytime we're going to one of these pilgrimages somewhere, I douse the room to see what needs to go with me. And I can use whatever I bring with me to generate particular altars. They all have a particular frequency or vibration. The pattern itself, everything needs to be in a particular geometric conjugation. so that they can complement each other to produce the effect that's needed. The best example we probably have is at Broughton, where the Genesis point was found, and then Peter, with his map, we located a place probably 40 miles north of Broughton in the Dales, in the middle of nowhere. And Peter's probably better to tell the story of where we were driving in the middle with no cell phone signalers or anything.
Yeah, so we just found this, followed this spot, went to this spot where lots of lines crossed up to the north of Broughton in the Dales. We're kind of tramping through the fields and came to the spot, and it was a kind of small plateau, and there was a mini wall around it. So something had been there beforehand, but when we got there, we had no Wi-Fi or phone signal at all, which was interesting. And then, when I do energy work, I'm normally looking for energy coming into the earth, cosmic energy coming into the earth, and energy coming off the earth, and the kind of qualities of those, and how far cosmic energy goes into the earth and how far the energy radiates off the earth. That'll tell you something about the quality of the energy at the place. And at this place, I couldn't pick up any of the incoming cosmic energy. I could only feel the radiance off the earth, nothing coming in. And so anyway, so Calen did his thing, set up his altar, and then, which, remember, as I said earlier, holds the information, and then activated the information with the sound of the bowl. And at the moment it did that, both of our phones pinged, and they came back online, and there was a message from the kind of, I'd say, the steward of of Broughton Estate, Paris, had sent us a message and came in just at that moment. So literally we were given a sign that the site was back online with Broughton, and I was able to pick up incoming cosmic energy at the location again. So
and there were four bars of 5G service.
Yeah.
That showed up on the phone.
Yeah. Somebody's pointing to I'll put a link into to the YouTube to an extended talk I did on this as well. It seems to be a popular topic. Like, normally I just get a couple of hundred views on my YouTube videos. This has over 9,000 views. So something's going on out there in the field. 8:35, you said, Stan. Look at the question at 8:35. I can't see an 8. Oh, I see. That's 8:35 your time. So that's kind of 17:35 my time. 17:35. What would the intention of an image? This is Kurt. What would the intention of an image depicting peace in everything? How does one bring it forth? No need to be there. Certainly images are things that could be, you could enter the information field, and therefore be a good resonator, I would call it, a good resonator for a potential crop circle. Absolutely. And images could be, and if they were related to peace in some way, and there were lots of people intending for peace in that time collectively, then, and also, either consciously or could consciously intend for a crop circle, for the image to appear as a crop circle, you're increasing the probability of that happening anyway.
And any particular pattern you're putting on the ground, I mean, I'm in Maine here, and on the 5 acres, I have 2 different labyrinths, a raven circle. 2 years ago, I put in an actual stone circle, which looks just like the stone circles in England. And I try to use those to push the idea of peace in the world. I have a large flag that flies in the middle of the whole complex back there, this peace, world peace. So with your intention, you don't need something that's 40 feet wide. You can just set up a small altar, even in your home, on a mantle or a dresser or a table or something, and put your intention into it to birth compassion, which I think is probably the most important thing. So you don't have to wait for some magic thing to appear on the land anywhere. Just with your own intention, you can create one of these energetic, high quality, informative entities anywhere you can, anywhere you want.
Yeah, the role of sacred geometry, Jonathan. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the information in these patterns comes in these geometric forms. Generally, I mean, Calen, we could do a whole new session on sacred geometry. Calen, do you want to say anything about the relationship between sacred geometry, the patterns, and the energy and things?
Well, the first quote talked about the world is all geometry. A Mongolian shaman, if you probably a good idea to get Peter Kingsley's book on story waiting to pierce you, which speaks about a Mongolian shaman who came from Mongolia to Greece in search of Pythagoras to hand him a golden arrow. I fortunately have one of the golden arrows in the chamber in there, from which inside that golden arrow were the mathematics and the sacred geometry and the music and everything that eventually became everything that Pythagoras worked on, but that came out of Apurba, out of the Himalayas originally. So the sacred geometry, the entire world is sacred geometry. I'm working with Fibonacci numbers, which are the basis of everything. Also working with Lucas numbers, which is a variation of Fibonacci numbers, and then my own set of numbers, which are the blended Fibonacci and Lucas numbers. So you have Lucas numbers, which are on one side of the veil. You have Fibonacci's, which are the reality as we appears to us that we think is the actual reality, and then the veil are where the Rayne numbers are. And the idea is to generate a particular algorithm that can bring that sound into place where you will be able to pierce the veil and influence what's happening beyond what you think you can.
Just saying to Paul, yeah, they do see crop circles appearing in different kinds of crops, sometimes just in grass, sometimes in sand and snow. We've seen them, but ultimately the phenomenon itself of this interaction between electromagnetic charge, water, and information can be happening all over the place. The question is just whether there's actually a substance for it to be able to give you a kind of 2D cutoff, as it were. Let's see. This is Calen. What? This is just about your image, Calen, that you have on your background. Rita asking what they are.
These are from Nepal. There was a particular tribe, for lack of a better word, in Nepal that had female healers. The best term I can use for the people in Nepal are healers, and this particular lineage had 10 women, and at that point, the 10th person didn't have a female, so they would make these effigy figures of each person when they passed away that held all of the information of that person, and then they're in a line. The 10 of them are connected together, and their arms move. So I can set these in an altar and access the information from the 10 women over the 10 generations, and you can move their arms in a particular way that receives the information. So it's not a crop circle, so to speak, but if I place these women on the ground and move their arms in a particular way, it sends off a vibration where I can receive and send information into the field. It's just one of the ritual objects I've been fortunate to receive just because of the work I do and the level of work I do. It requires a number of ritual objects that appear when they need to appear, and they all want to be together. And I have them sitting in a room, and I can draw on them to do the work I do.
And Connie and Andrew asking whether you have a center there, Calen. He does have a place, yeah, that you can by pre-arrangement visit, I think.
Yeah, I'll type in the website. I have
people were asking me lots of questions, so I developed this website over the last 2 years that has all of the notes from all the classes I've taken, all the papers I ever wrote for Wisdom, the dissertation on quantum non-locality and systematic morphogenesis, all of the photos, poetry, sermons, paintings, and everything I have in this one place. And we're trying to get all of the ritual objects in there. I'm up to, I think we have about at least 300 in there now. Of images of the ritual objects. So I'll type that in, and you're welcome to go there. It's all free, so there's that. But you can find a lot of information there, especially on sacred geometry, because it's all the notes from all the classes. I've got like 7 certifications in sacred geometry and geomancy, and all the notes from all the classes are in there.
Yeah, you used to be able to. I was just looking to see if I could find cropcircleconnector.com, but it seems to have disappeared.
Temporary temples is another one.
Oh yeah, temporary temples is a good one as well. That's a shame, because crop circle connector you could get like updates on and stuff. Temporary temples, yeah. Temporary temples is run by the people who talked to us when we did the wisdom class there. Temporary temples is another one. Yeah, I mean, essentially we're talking about, information and frequency. So all these connections to music, make complete sense. I mean, everything's information ultimately. So things, receive information and radiate information the whole time. And then particular patterns have a certain function. So in some of the energetic work we do with eco-intention, which you might have heard Hans talk about, we use different crop circles for different energetic functions, whether it's a certain kind of healing or grounding energy or accessing information fields. It's like a mandala in a way. Different mandalas hold different information and have different effects. So you just have to kind of, by experiment or intuition, sense which crop circle would best serve you, for a certain need you have at the moment. And it's like a resonator. It can kind of resonate with your field and help you move forward. So it's also, you should, if you ever enter a crop circle, you should do so really consciously and, in a very grounded way, and check first intuitively, is this crop circle meant for you? Because some people go in and get completely dizzy and have to go out vomiting because there's not a fit. So you've got to, it's like walking into a sacred site, essentially. You need to prepare yourself and check. No, Suzanne, we haven't said anything about Nan Lu. I haven't heard of him. That's an interesting one to follow up. Thank you for that. And then somebody was saying, is there a relationship with our Earth receiving the current solar CMEs? That's the solar flares and things. Well, in terms of the, electromagnetics, I guess there could well be. But I'm afraid I don't know, Linda. Looking. Well, I'm sure there are ley lines. Well, there are telluric energies, of course, all over the Earth. Paul just saying that on the maps, they're often concentrated in UK and USA. The question is just to, have people identified them and add. I mean, remember the collection I shared has just come from people who have pulled them together and put them as Google overlay, Google Earth overlays. So it's where people have done the research, really. If you just click on just some of the grids, you'll see the grids are kind of equally spread around the Earth. But people have discovered these, these sites. There's been quite a popular thing in England, certainly for a long time. Yeah, Matthew says,
and you could also pull up Buckminster Fuller's, I think it's Universal Vector Geometry Grid, the 64 nodes. What I do with Peter's map, if I'm working and consulting on a property, is I try to find the nearest nearest line to the property, and then I track it back to these clusters where there's a lot of different ones, which means it's a heavy energy point, to figure out what is informing the property that I'm consulting on, because there would be lines that are almost invisible on the grid that I work with that are coming from those particular lines. Just as an example, when I'm running a line from Maine, one of the lines runs to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And what was interesting was when people left Maine to migrate west toward the West Coast, a significant number ended up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And that was because the vibration there was similar. So they were called to that vibration. Just as they crossed the country, gradually their inner being or whatever kept drawing them towards something that felt familiar to them. And I believe that some of the people that came from Europe to the United States were also drawn to a particular energetic. I was born in Kentucky, and Kentucky has a particular vibration that connects into the UK and Wales and Scotland and different places where some of my ancestors came from. So I think it's almost like birds tracking when they're migrating. When people migrate, they have that same magnetic pull to particular spots.
Yeah. Good. Well, we're getting towards the end here. Jim, do you want to come back in?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much. One of the things that I'm very intrigued by in your presentation earlier, Peter, was the relationship between crop circles and water. Because I've been really immersing myself in Veda Austin and other water practitioners. And it's an extraordinary phenomenon when you really understand that water is not only an intelligence, but that it is capable of creating geometric forms in what Veda Austin calls hydroglyphs. And we're going to be talking about that again next week. And I've been experimenting with a little petri dish every day about my capacity to create an intent. And then you freeze the water and a symbol will emerge. So this notion that you're proposing of that the interior of the earth, the water in the earth, and the etherics in the atmosphere, but knowing that the atmosphere is also full of water, droplets of water. And Calen, I'd love to have you amplify that, because that feels to me to be really a highly potentiated domain for further research and reflection.
Pop me up. What the crop circle from the cathedral, those 5 raindrops underneath, the teardrops, my understanding from other people I've talked to are there are 5 wells beneath the cathedral. So you've got this really heavy potentiated telluric site, and beneath it are 5 wells. The reason I bought this property in Maine, sight unseen, and I had to come up to see it then, was because there was something about the land that was vibrating really high. And when I got here, there's 2 large stone structures in the woods that have a really high vibration. But when I pulled the well cover off to see what the flow was, a typical well in Maine is 5 gallons a minute, and this one is 25 gallons a minute. And I'm sitting on basically the same aquifer as Poland Springs, the bottled water company. So our property here has this massive flow of water beneath it, which is why I'm able to do some of the work I can do, is because anything I set up in the woods or anything I'm trying to do here in the house, I'm sitting on top of this massive water aquifer, which can move the information anywhere it wants to through the water.
Amazing. Amazing. Any further comments you wanted to make, Peter, on this?
I don't think so. I think it's like I think you said at the beginning, it's we can all have our theories on it. I'm kind of comfortable with at the moment what I came up with. We should remain curious about it and play. And it's this spirit of like playfulness in the realm of information and consciousness, and see what happens. We start to remember that we're co-creators if we choose to be in this reality. And well, Calen very actively, obviously, and you can see how the work that he does then is reflected through these information fields. So I think, as somebody said, in a way that whether the veil is getting thinner, or certainly our consciousness somehow is remembering the nature of our interconnectedness through these information and energy fields. And I think the crop circles are a way of helping us remember that as well, because they forced our kind of Western rational materialist mind, to ask questions, because we had no explanation for it. If we do come up with explanations like mine or Calen's, they're related to things that traditional science, wouldn't touch with a barge pole. So, but based on the 28 years of research at Princeton and other things, are actually very valid scientifically now, and based on a proper understanding of quantum science and the kind of geometric science and things that Calen has worked on. It is actually all very, very much able to be validated through science. You just have to expand beyond just the purely materialist science, that unfortunately Western civilization is caught in now. So stay curious, I would say, and keep playing. That would be my kind of message. Yeah.
I think that's probably a good final note to strike on a conversation such as crop circles. Is just stay curious, everyone. Stay innocent, stay curious, and stay open to where your curiosity leads to.
Calen, anything to add?
Calen?
No, if somebody want to know about my background, I'd say go to the website. You'll find everything you need. Just I have many strange titles. The latest cool thing that's happening is Harlexton College in the UK wants a Hogwarts school for adults in the summer of 2025. So myself and Colette and Krista from the university are going to do that. So Ubiquity will actually be able to form a Hogwarts school, and maybe we'll get into more of this.
That would be incredible. That would be just incredible. Hogwarts School of Magic. Okay, everyone, I think that'll do it for today. Peter, Calen, can you join the after chat for a few minutes?
I'm afraid I can't. I've got another commitment.
If someone can send me a link.
Okay, I'll send it to you. Actually, Stan will put it in the chat.
Okay.
Stan, we need to put the link in the chat. There we go. So you click on that, Calen, and you'll go right in. So Calen will join the after chat. You'll see the link that Stan just put in. You also received it in your Zoom reminder. And then tomorrow we'll be circling back for the next presentation from Linda White, hopefully without any of the technical glitches that we experienced yesterday, because that's a very, very powerful exploration of the national security state. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Calen. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.